Good morning and welcome into Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host this week, Austin Amandolia, and as you can see, my typical co-host, Ryan Weiss, is not here. And so I'm taking over the reins, which means, we're going to get weird with our draft. We're going to get back to some standard non-PPR scoring. That's just what I'm here for. I'm here to mess up the flow of everything. And with me in the co-host seat this week, we have the only Josh Hudson, founder of Club Fantasy. Josh, how are you this morning?
I'm great. I'm telling you, every single time I have to fill in for Ryan, I get stuck doing standard scoring drafts, and I'm just like, I have not played this setting in almost 20 years. This is going to be interesting. So that's why I always pick the spots like early in the draft. So I'm like, I know where I'm going right here. We'll just keep it this way. But not enough about me. This is all about our guest today because I'm super stoked. Big shout out to Faith Enos for helping us book Mr. Tom Everett Scott. How we doing?
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Good. I love appearing on fantasy football shows. She knew that. Faith said, this guy's an SLUT for this stuff. And, let's get him on there. I love it. I'm ready to go. I'm excited. The season's about to start. Hard Knocks tomorrow night. Let's go.
Yeah, it's weird. Love it. Football season is among us. And if you are like me and you are among the more uncultured of us, you may be wondering, who is Tom Everett Scott? Tom Everett Scott is an actor, y'all. He has starred in shows such as Saved, 13 Reasons Why, Sons of Anarchy. I looked this all up because I'm very uncultured. And you can ask my friends. I have seen nothing. I have a buddy.
There's a hot show on right now that is called The Summer I Turned Pretty, and people get into that.
Yeah, and Tom, is there anything you want to plug right now? Anything you just want to highlight? Work you're doing? Things you want people to know about?
I'm not supposed to plug stuff because the actors and writers are on strike right now. We're actually not supposed to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like I just said, there was a hot show called Summer I Turned Pretty. It's not about my character. It's good, and it's got a lot of Taylor Swift music, which is really pumping right now. And and I'm in other movies that you can enjoy, like La La Land and That Thing You Do, while you're sitting and waiting for new content.
We won't tell the union heads, Tom. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and
don't let them know.
And I'm here to plug the fact that there's the writer strike going on. We want to support you all so that you get what you need and are able to continue producing great content for those of us who love television. Like, let's support the workers here. So we're going to go ahead and get the draft started. I'm going to pull it up on the screen, and Josh is going to hit start draft. Before we get the draft started, just a reminder to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you have notifications on and know every time we go live. This week, like I mentioned, we are doing what used to be standard is no longer standard leagues, but it's non-PPR, and we even are going back to 4-point passing touchdowns. So if you have watched Club Fantasy before, you know that standard scoring for us includes 6-point passing touchdowns, but we're kicking it back to where most people either started their I almost said Formula One for some reason, or people almost started their fantasy football journeys with standard scoring. And I just want to kick it off just talking a little intro to Tom. And Tom, you let us know just like when did you start playing fantasy football? What got you into it?
I went to Syracuse University back in 1988 was my freshman year. And right away I met this guy named Bruce Davidson, who is still the commissioner of one of the leagues I'm in. And that's where it all started back then.
Yeah, that's incredible. Back in college, I started in college as well. Josh, when did you start? I forget when you started playing fantasy football.
I started my senior year of high school. It was my very first fantasy football league. It was on the archaic platform that is NFL.com. And I guess it's not as archaic as, filling out stat sheets and faxing them to your commissioner, but we'll call NFL.com's platform archaic. But yeah, that's when I started playing. It was just kind of on a whim with a buddy, and just kind of blew up from there for me. So
yeah, I'm here for it. Honestly, we should do this one year. We should have the Club Fantasy folks sit down and write out their stats and their teams and send them in.
Ain't nobody got time for that shit, Austin.
It could just be a great nostalgia vibe, just kicking it back. It's a few notes in the chat. First off, Faith in the chat as always. Best of all, he knows Dolly Parton. You left that out,
Yeah.
Tom.
Oh, yeah, I did. That's true. I shouldn't have done that. I'm in trouble now. Yeah, I did a movie for NBC last year called Dolly Parton's Mountain Magic Christmas. And it was super fun. I mean, look, she's a legend. I was definitely going to do that show.
Yeah, no, she is a legend. Love that.
Faith is one of the biggest Dolly Parton fans on the planet, so she had to bring that one up.
Joel saying full solidarity with the writers and actors. Love that. And then apparently Zach is out here to make enemies because he says he's ready to just snipe Tom all day in this draft. We're going to see how that pulls out.
Who's going to snipe me? The guy who picks ninth there?
Picking ninth, yeah.
Yeah, he did. I wanted Chubb, so there you go. Well done.
There you go. Mission accomplished.
For sure.
So, Tom, what kind of leagues do you typically play in?
So I think I'm only in one that's standard scoring, to be honest. And it's an auction league, and that's my poker buddies since I think we've had that league since 2010. 10 team. There's a couple actors in there, Josh Lucas and Michael Kelly. I don't know if you know them by name, but you would know them by face. But that's a fun one. Yeah, from House of Cards, and now he's on Jack Ryan and the new show Lioness. Yeah. So old buddy of mine. We go back to when we were first starting out in New York City. And then I kind of host. Commissioner of a league that is like my family and my friends, and that's super fun. But I've convinced them to make that PPR.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Do I need to turn off sounds? Is that bothering you guys?
I'm not hearing sounds, but
I'm not hearing anything. But...
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of fun. I love having those long-standing leagues with friends. And you mentioned having an auction or a salary cap draft. I mean, we have had that requested to do multiple times on the show, and I think it would take just way too long to do it because in this setting, we try and keep the show under an hour. Do you do that one as a live draft? Like how is that one managed?
Which one, the auction one or the one that I do?
Yeah, the auction one.
The auction. So we do that over Zoom, but it is on it's on ESPN. I think everyone that I know in my age group, just like the home leagues, are ESPN because everybody's just so familiar with it now, and you can't get anyone to change, even though Sleeper is better. You've also got Flea Flicker is really fun especially if you want to do an email draft. MFL is the no frills flight of fantasy football websites, but that one's even better than these because you can customize them. So we're all kind of stuck in the ESPN world, but we do them live over Zoom for that auction one, and then the one that I'm a commissioner of, we absolutely 100%, even during COVID, did it live where we stuck stickers to the board.
Oh, I gotta ask, how long does a Zoom auction league draft take you guys? Because I've done my fair share of auctions, and these things will go on for 5-6 hours at a time.
Not that long. There's 10 teams. We don't have super long rosters. I think we start 1, 2, 2 flex, tight end, kicker, D, and probably have like a 7-guy bench. It's fairly fast. Everyone's kind of stuck in their ways of how they draft, and we all know each other's moves, and it's not that complicated.
Well, and also, are you letting ESPN run the auction for you, or are you doing like old fashioned, like you have your auctioneer that's like listing off players?
No, ESPN just you take turns nominating a player. That's where the real strategy comes in, guys.
100%.
Yeah. I guess I'm gonna go late round QB.
Yeah, we did that. The first year we did our salary cap draft, we did it where it was like you had to say like, $35, $38, and we were all doing it verbally, and we did that over Zoom. That took a hot minute, and that was a mistake. And since then we moved to just letting the app do it because the platforms can handle it pretty well. So,
and you can still, as the manager, like you can still go through and make your individual nominations anyway. So there is still some strategy that's built into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun way to play fantasy football and to draft. And speaking of the draft, we're now into the 4th round, and there's already some fascinating stuff happening. So again, we're in standard scoring, non-PPR, so players are not getting those points for receptions, and we're already seeing. Well, we're sort of seeing
too many
backs.
receivers.
way too many wide receivers, according to Josh. So
Oh,
that's what I was going to say.
I agree.
I was a little surprised. We've been seeing about 3 or 4 running backs off the board in the first round in half PPR and full PPR, but here it's the same. It's like no change, even though we're in non-PPR scoring. So we're going to start with Tom because Josh is about to pick. What do you think about where the running backs are going so far?
I mean, just then on my 2-3 turn, or 3-4 turn, I did notice there was a huge drop off to the wide receivers, and I already took my 2 running backs. Yeah, this definitely looks like a PPR draft.
Yeah,
People didn't get the memo apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Sometimes we're stuck in our ways. Definitely looking like a PPR draft. Now, Tom, you said you took Bijan Robinson with your first pick, and I don't want to have you talk about your team too much, but you said you were sniped by Zach, who took Nick Chubb. So you prefer Nick Chubb over Bijan. What's kind of like driving that decision there?
I think all arrows pointing up for Nick Chubb to have maybe like one of the biggest seasons of his career. It just kind of all seems to be pointing that way, especially in the standard scoring. I would definitely want him more than I would want any other running back besides McCaffrey or Eckler. Yeah, I mean, he's just going to be on the field all the time. That offense is going to improve. It is. Everyone knows it is. And they're going to be in positive game script, and they're going to just be handing the ball to Chubb, I think.
Yeah, he seems to have.
And he's amazing. He's a great running back, right? I mean, look at what he's done and what company he's in over time, for all time. He's up there with like Jim Brown on a lot of stuff.
Chubb is awesome.
Yeah, he definitely, I think many would say, is one of the best pure running backs in the league, pure rushing running backs in the league. And I agree, he's got very little competition in the backfield this year, so should be poised for a pretty decent season.
So I didn't get him, so I'm already mad at you guys. I had to take Bijan Robinson.
I'll have to sit down and have a stern conversation with Zach after this mock draft.
So should I talk about how much I love Bijan now?
Oh yeah, go for it.
I'll be honest with you. I was considering Bijan at 3. So for you to get him at 10, I was like, what is going on here? This feels criminal. So
it does feel, Bijan Robinson does feel like, rookie year Saquon, very exciting, going to be the focal point of this offense. And so I mean, I definitely think he's a first round guy.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. And you're playing to the host here, Tom, because you may not know this, but I am an Atlanta Falcons fan, born and raised in Georgia. And so I am all about Bijan Robinson going in the first round. Josh, let's come to you. Let's talk about these running backs a little bit more. So you already mentioned you're surprised of how many receivers are going off the board. So what do you think is going on with these running backs? Is this a mistake to have so few running backs going in the first round?
100%. I mean, standard scoring, you should be looking at probably about 7 to 8 running backs in the first round, if I'm calculating things properly in my head. So just based on my projections, going through and like when I switched it over to like the 4-point passing touchdown, the non-PPR setup, I had 12 running backs score projected for over 200 fantasy points. I only had 6 wide receivers projected for over 200 fantasy points.
Wow.
And no tight ends over 200 fantasy points. But I only had 2 tight ends, Kelsey and Andrews, for projected more than 115. So you can kind of see the positional advantage there. But then you look at, the quarterbacks and the rushing value. So, like, that's why for me, like, I put an emphasis on grabbing a Mark Andrews, grabbing a Lamar Jackson, and I'm just going to load up on guys that are touching the football a ton. But not only that, have high touchdown upside, because that's what I want in a standard scoring, because yards are only going to get you so far. It's the touchdowns. Like, if you compare volume and touchdowns, give me that 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where, like you're saying, in the standard scoring, touchdowns are at a premium. They are so important for making sure that you have an advantage in your league. So Zach popping in and just saying he dropped a Chubb article yesterday. So this explains why he was big on Nick Chubb. I guess the solution is, Tom, you need to be following Zach on Twitter so that you can know his player takes.
Okay.
And then
because he also just sniped me on Debo.
Oh,
that's okay.
No. Oh, no.
He's in my head.
Sometimes it just happens like that. So I want to talk a little bit about these quarterbacks because we're through 6 rounds and you both have already taken a quarterback. I don't want you to necessarily talk about your teams yet on this one, but we have 7 quarterbacks off the board through the first 6 rounds. And surprisingly, we didn't have the first quarterback go until like the 3rd or 4th round. I feel like we've often see them going in that 2-3 turn. So let's start with Tom. Like, how do you feel about how early the quarterbacks are going? Do you feel comfortable with that?
I mean, I was thinking about taking Pat Mahomes or one of those top guys at the 3-4, honestly. So they are going earlier and earlier. There's been, I think trend wise, since the late round quarterback, and JJ, Zach Ericson and everything started, I think after the Michael Vick debacle, I think since then, and we've had these great quarterbacks, these top 5 guys, they are worth having. You don't have to wait a long time to get a quarterback and still be competitive.
Yeah, 100%. Josh, what about you? How are you feeling about the quarterbacks coming off the board? You were obviously one of the people who took a quarterback early. Do you think they're coming off too early? How are you feeling about that?
I think that there's a pretty definitive tier break when it comes to the quarterback position. So for me, it's your top 3 guys, right? It's Allen, it's Mahomes, it's Hurts. And then through most of it, you can probably sit down and wait. I tend to change my strategy a little bit when I'm looking at damn Akers did go, son of a bitch. Yeah, we'll just go wide receiver again. So like with the standard scoring, and then you drop from our typical 6-point per passing touchdown more towards the 4. I think that, guys like a Justin Fields and a Lamar Jackson kind of elevate a little bit more because of how much they're going to run the ball and how much more that touchdown upside goes up as a result. So that's why I was okay taking Lamar Jackson there in the 4th, simply because, I knew that the middle round wide receivers I'm perfectly fine with in standard scoring anyway, because at that point you're praying for touchdowns. And I want guys that like a DJ Moore, a Drake London, who I went with my last 2 picks, that I know they're going to be the focal points of their passing attack, which means that they're going to have that touchdown upside if their quarterbacks can find them in the end zone.
Yeah, exactly. I think because we're doing 4-point passing touchdown this week, having the rushing upside is so much more vital because the ceiling is just so much higher when you have that rushing upside. You can get 6 points for rushing touchdowns compared to those 4 for passing touchdowns. So now that we're getting a few rounds down, we started pretty receiver heavy, but now in the past few rounds, we've had a lot of running backs coming off the board. Particularly in round 2, we had 5 come off the board, and then we had another 6 off the board in round 5. What about this middle tier of running backs? We have guys like Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Alexander Madison, all going off the board relatively close together. How do we feel about that tier, Tom? When you're looking at running backs, if you're in that tier, how comfortable do you feel about your running backs?
Yeah, it's a scary tier for me. I'm definitely a believer in the running back dead zone. I think, I like to get an anchor early and then I like to wait. This was very not typical of me to take ATN or somebody like that in the 3rd round. But I did kind of want to just pay homage to the standard scoring thing. But for me, it's about get an anchor early and then wait and just have a bunch of ZeroRB guys at the end of the draft, because when you look at a season like that, and if you have value in other positions, you can either trade for another running back or you wind up because of injury having a starter at some point during the season.
Yeah, Josh, where are you at? So I know you're on the clock right now, but where are you at in the kind of that mid tier where you've got the kind of Breece Hall, Joe Mixon, Jahmyr Gibbs? When you start to get into that tier, how are you feeling about these running backs?
I mean, I'm fine. I don't really have any issues with Breece Hall. I figured he was going to be a slow start anyway. That's why they've been flirting with, adding a guy like Dalvin Cook. They bring in Izzy Abenakanda in the draft. Anytime you're coming off of a major knee injury, like expect competition at that point. But a lot of these other guys, they're volume plays, right? I mean, if you want to keep with the theme of like a Jahmyr Gibbs, for instance, like, yeah, those are more of your pass catching types. Whereas, you get a little bit lower into the James Conner, the Rashad White tier. It's strictly volume, and you're just praying that they score because they're in such terrible offenses.
Yeah, I wouldn't want either one of those guys this year.
We're on the same page, Tom.
All right. And if you are grabbing a guy like that in that range, I mean, I usually do go for the guys who are known pass catchers. If they're like a pass catcher in a committee backfield, I'd rather have that guy than the guy who's the thumper.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to draw our attention to one team that I'm finding very interesting. They're in the 7th slot. This is Richard, and I can't see the rest of the name, but they're on auto draft. And so
I saw that.
So we're not going to blame them for how this draft is going, but what we do know is that the auto draft is going to be based on ADP. And so what is interesting to me about Sleeper's ADP here is it has them taking Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook all on the same team. Now, Breece Hall coming off injuries and probably going to have a slow start. Alvin Kamara, we already know, is going to be missing 3 games for suspension. And Dalvin Cook doesn't even have a team right now.
Right.
So, Josh, let's start with you. Let's just ignore the auto draft for a second. How are you feeling about this running back room so far?
I want to find a better way to donate my money. How's that? No, the running back room in a standard, not great, Bob. Again, I have zero issue with Breece Hall, especially in the 4th round. I think in most standard drafts, he's still probably a 2nd, even a 3rd round pick. Kamara, I don't hate simply because, only missing 3 games. All right, that's fine. They need to find more ways to get him into space, and I think they'll be able to accomplish that. And that's why they went out and got Jamal Williams. They need somebody that can be sort of that in between the tackles runner. I mean, Dalvin Cook is strictly a dart throw at this point. You think he might end up in Miami. He's flirted with the Jets and the Patriots, but his heart of hearts, he wants to be in Miami, and I think he would be a perfect fit in Miami. It's just going to be a matter of making the money work. Yeah,
Tom, what about you? What are you thinking about this running back room?
I mean, come on. He doesn't have a starter yet, so that is a concern. I guess his best bet is that Dalvin Cook will latch onto a team somewhere, right, and get snaps right in that week 1 area.
Yeah, this team is poised for disaster if Dalvin Cook ends up signing with the New York Jets after all, and then you get this nice little Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, picking which one of those two is gonna pop off from week to week. Just be perfect. So another team I wanted to take a second to highlight is our buddy Joel, because I just noticed our friend Joel, he is a big 0 running back guy. And today, Joel is drafting from the 6th spot, but he did not go 0 running back today. He had 2 running backs on his team by the 5th round, taking Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd and David Montgomery in the 5th. And I think this probably has something to do with the fact that we're in non-PPR scoring, but Tom, we're going to start with you again. What do you think of this strategy here, getting those 2 running backs by the 5th round?
Well, I will say, I mean, he did have sort of a ZeroRB build. I mean, he did take Kelsey in the 1st round and then a wide receiver. So he took Taylor in the 3rd round. I mean, that is some restraint. Jalen Hurts, then David Montgomery. Yeah, I don't know if I would have reached for Montgomery there. I don't know what he's going to do this year. I always bet against David Montgomery, and then he always winds up being better than I think he'll be.
Yeah. See, I always end up betting for David Montgomery, and then he ends up being worse than I think he will be. So we just need to take
because it's all how you look at it, right?
Yeah, we just need to find a more balanced approach between you and me on that one. Josh, what about you? What do you think about Joel's team so far? Waiting a little bit on running back, but then snagging 2 by the 5th round.
Well, I mean, in fairness, he took guys that are going to put up a lot of points on the ground. I mean, anytime you add a Jalen Hurts, you basically have a second running back in and of itself, on top of being a quality passer as a quarterback. So I don't hate it from that perspective. I mean, getting Kelsey is such a positional advantage in any format, no matter how you slice it. And then, just loading up on upside at the wide receiver position. I mean, we know what Devontae Adams brings to the table, especially in terms of yards and touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor's situation right now, a little murky, but at the end of the day, he's still Jonathan Taylor and he should be fine. He's been a big Christian Watson guy for a long time. Mike Evans, we know his pop weeks. It's just going to be a lot's going to depend on that quarterback situation.
Yeah, exactly. And Joel in the chat saying all that matters are touchdowns. Totally true. It's also why I love that Mike Evans pick, because he had an awful touchdown season last year. But if you look at his history, he has like multiple double-digit touchdown seasons. So I actually really like that pick here, especially where he's getting him. There's some more sniping going on elsewhere. Seems like Matt is a little bit upset with Faith and her Dameon Harris pick is what it seems.
In fairness, Faith, I almost took him at my 11th pick. So Matt, you wouldn't have got him either. So don't worry about it.
There you go. So Matt, it wasn't happening. Yeah, I think Dameon Harris is a good one, but I want to get to a question in the chat from Mike25. This is in a regular PPR. I just called PPR regular after we're doing standard scoring today. Mike has pick number 3 in a PPR 12-team league. Who should they grab? So if we just look at ADP right now, it typically goes Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase, and then you start looking at either Christian McCaffrey. You look at Cooper Kupp going around that 3 spot, sometimes Travis Kelce. Who would y'all be taking with the 3 spot? Let's assume that Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase are the 1-2, and you have everybody else. Who are you taking with that 3 spot? Tom, let's start with you.
So you said Jefferson and Chase are gone. Who am I taking?
Yes.
If it's PPR, I want to take Kupp. If it's something like this, I'm going to take Eckler.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. With the PPR, taking Cooper Kupp, he should be a target hog again this year, and so that's a really good upside play. And then Eckler, I think he keeps scoring like 20 touchdowns a year. I don't know how he's doing it, but he keeps doing it.
I think it's out of spite, because I told him on a podcast that I had never drafted him, and I have like 12 leagues a year, and he said, "You've never drafted me?" And I said, "Yeah, I've just never had the honor of having you on my team." And that week he went out and scored 6 touchdowns. and so Liz Loza, who's my friend who got me on that podcast with those guys, she texted me. She goes, "I think Austin took that personally."
That is incredible. That is a golden story.
I'm going to make it a point to get him on one of my teams this year, at least one of my teams.
Well, maybe you shouldn't, and I'll just send you a little text at some point throughout the year and just get you to remind Austin Eckler, like, hey, I still haven't taken you. And I really need that win. It's not bad. Keep that train going. Josh, what about you? If you're going at the 3 spot, Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase are gone, full PPR, where are you going?
Yeah, I mean, if the top 2 wide receivers are gone for me, I'm taking McCaffrey. He's my. I have him and Eckler kind of neck and neck at RB1 in PPR, so I wouldn't hate Eckler there. I think that there's so much more opportunity with McCaffrey in San Francisco just to be more efficient. Not necessarily that he's going to have overall the better season. I just think that the efficiency levels will be there more so with McCaffrey than Eckler. So I would lean McCaffrey in that instance.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think you can make a case either way. I would also make a plug for considering Travis Kelce there, getting that tight end positional advantage locked down. I think that's a very reasonable way to go. But the good thing about the 3 spot is there are not many ways that you can lose your league by making a pick at the 3rd round. If you're taking any of those 1st round ADP guys, you're probably going to be set. Matt Record taking a defense right now.
Considering he also writes with IDP guys, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, this is just him plugging his stuff. I didn't even know we made it so that you could select defenses today. That just threw me for a loop. I wasn't expecting that one.
Hey, if we're gonna go old school and go with the standard, the non-PPR, the 4 points, you gotta throw in the defense and kickers, man. Doesn't mean I gotta draft one, but I'm gonna do it. So
we'll talk a little bit more about that defense strategy here in a minute. But I want to go to the first team who had the first pick in the draft, Bro Cow, who they went very running back heavy to start off the draft. They took 5 running backs within the first 7 rounds. And this was a little bit surprising to me. Also sniped Josh, right? Took Cam Akers. Josh was mad about that.
Yeah, I considered Akers over DJ Moore, and I was like, maybe I can get Akers on the kickback, but no.
Yeah, so broke out punting the quarterback position all the way until round 12 and just loading up on running backs early. Tom, what do you feel about this strategy, taking these running backs early?
I mean, looking at my running backs right now, I wish I had taken running backs early. It's not a bad strategy. I mean, sometimes it's best just to keep balanced, I definitely this went differently than I thought it would this draft. Let's be totally honest. I don't know if I love my team.
That's why it's a mock draft, Tom.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the great thing about a mock draft.
Doesn't mean I'm not going to sleep tonight,
Yeah, and in 30 minutes it'll be over, and you won't have to think about this team again and think about how to change it and make it better, which is just great. So Josh, once you make your pick, I want to get your take on Brokehouse team taking the 5 running backs in the first 7 rounds, and just how you feel about that strategy overall.
I'm for it. I mean, I took 3 in the first 5 picks. I added a couple more late. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I want guys with high touchdown upside, and theoretically, if you're touching the football more often, you're going to have those opportunities more so than somebody else. So, I mean, I like Connor from a volume standpoint. I think the offense is dog shit, so he's not going to have a ton of opportunity to score touchdowns. Cam Akers, again, somebody that should, in theory, touch the football a ton because they don't really have anybody else behind him or working with him in tandem in that backfield. So, he'll have some opportunities, but Cooper Kupp is such a monster in the red zone that it may not even matter, and he could still only score 5 touchdowns. Miles Sanders, kind of another guy, like we saw him with the touchdown explosion last year, but that was a much better offense than what he's now in Carolina. But with so much inexperience with him at the quarterback position, they could lean on him, and he could still end up scoring a good amount of touchdowns. So again, I don't hate that. Walker, I'm fine with. Najee, fine with. Fading the wide receivers. That's basically what I did. So
yeah,
I'm all
there
for
you go. And Josh, you're on the clock, so go ahead and make your pick. And while you're making your pick, I'm gonna tee up a keep trade cut for this week. These are 3 players that went next to each other in this draft, and we've been doing these every week, and I get the honor of picking the keep trade cut, and hopefully this is one that makes you all uncomfortable. So I'm gonna go with the running backs this week because there are 3 running backs who went very close to each other. In fact, went back to back to back that I found interesting, and they are Miles Sanders, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Dameon Pierce. And so, Josh, we're going to start with you. If you're having to keep, trade, and cut those 3 running backs, Miles Sanders, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Dameon Pierce, who are you keeping, who are you trading, and who are you cutting?
Are we talking standard non-PPR formats or just in general?
Let's talk standard non-PPR since we're
okay.
The format
I'm keeping Dameon Pierce because that's who I drafted, and I went out and targeted him specifically. I am trading Jahmyr Gibbs simply because I think that people's viewpoint of him will be skewed from all of the PPR takes, and that he's not going to get the type of rushing attempts that you probably want in a standard format. And then I would cut Miles Sanders, which pains me as an Eagles fan.
Yeah, keeping the faith. Aren't you supposed to be like rooting for him through the
I am rooting for him, but it's just I know that he's not a sexy name and he's not going to get as much back in trade value as the top 12 NFL draft pick. So
yeah,
got to play the odds.
That is fair. And we often, whenever we do these, we often end up having the player with the most trade value being the one that we're trading, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're our least favorite player of the team, or that they're the ones that we really are feeling good on. Tom, what about you? If you had to keep trading cut Miles Sanders, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Dameon Pierce, who would you be keeping? Who would you be cutting?
You know, as you were saying it, I was thinking those three. That's exactly how I would do it. I mean, keep Pierce, trade Gibbs, just because I think Gibbs's name is sexy and you can actually get something good back, and then cut Sanders because I don't believe in Sanders there in Carolina, even though that's probably totally just a miscalculation because he could thrive.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I mean, just to change it up, I would say here, I should pick somebody. I'll pick Clyde. Yeah, I mean, you could also argue that you would keep Sanders and then trade Pierce and cut Gibbs. You know, you just don't know what Gibbs is going to be in that offense. He's probably going to be pretty great, but you just don't know. It's an unknown.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. It's not. It seems like it's become kind of a foregone conclusion that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be an elite running back in that offense because the Detroit Lions took him at the 15th overall pick in the NFL draft. But we don't know that yet. We haven't seen him play in the NFL yet, and we know that he's not as good of a pass blocker, so he's not going to have all the opportunities to be on the field that we might expect. Right. So we'll see. We'll see how that one pans out. So we've just wrapped up our draft. And the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about defenses and kickers because it's August. People are starting to get into drafts now. And even though the fantasy analyst community seems to hate team defenses and kickers, they still matter. They still are in majority of leagues that are being played. And we see a mix of approaches here. So we only had 3 teams take a team defense, and we had 3 teams decide to not take a kicker. So I want to just get y'all's take because both of you decided no kickers, no defenses. And we're gonna start with Tom. Like
in solidarity, Tom.
That's right.
We're gonna start with you. What are you thinking about drafting team defenses and kickers?
I refuse. I just no. I don't know. I just didn't think about it. Typically, I just wait till the last 2 rounds to grab those too.
Yeah, and I mean, in a typical draft, we probably would have had like 2 more rounds. If you were actually drafting, you would probably had a 17-player roster, and so you would have had a couple of extra rounds to take a couple of those. Josh, where are you at? Where's the love for the kickers and the team defenses?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that I'm team no kicker. And defenses, I live in solidarity with my Stream Master General, Mr. Ryan Weiss, who couldn't be here today, as the streaming defenses. So I just follow him. He tells me who to pick up, and I pick them up. And if I'm in a league with him, I pick up his second best because he'll grab the one that's first. So that's kind of the way that I go when it comes to defenses and kickers, in all honesty. I mean, I just think that they're a little wonky. Like there's a lot of peaks and valleys with them, and you know, you can move them up and down on and off the roster, and you know, just kind of go with it from there. Like especially I think they're like a third of the league right now is in kicker competitions, and you know, a couple of those that are going to get, you know, added late in the season or late in the preseason, excuse me, are going to end up as like a top 10 kicker this year. So more often than not, I'll find them in week 5 or 6 and then just, you know, ride them the rest of the season. So that tends to be my strategy when it comes to kickers and defenses. I'd much rather just get, you know, give me the position players. If maybe I can pull a 2-for-1 type trade before the season, open up a roster spot, and then I can just add a defense and or kicker. So.
Yeah, I love it. Now, Joel is coming to the defense of the kickers. saying quarterbacks and kickers are your most reliable scorers and standards. I want elite ones. Now, I think this is an interesting take when it comes.
I mean,
to
he would
kickers.
know because he's about as archaic as standard scoring is. So, sorry.
That's you're just like, piling on when he can't even be on here to defend himself. Come on, Josh.
I mean, it's ageism.
Yeah.
I thought we were beyond that.
Right there.
Hey, I got to get in my shots now. I turn 40 next week. All right. So
there you go. You do turn 40 next week. Hey, you know what? Joel's he's rolling with I am archaic. He gets it. No, I think it is. So I do kind of lean more with Joel on this one when it comes to kickers, where I want that kind of steady hand if I can get it. So like a Justin Tucker, Evan McPherson, those type of kickers I'm willing to take towards the end. Now with defenses, I'm a little bit more in line with you both, where I'm like, I'm gonna punt and wait to pick those up later, just because defenses are incredibly hard to predict from year to year. There's a lot of volatility in defenses, and it often becomes very matchup dependent, very schedule dependent. And so I will often wait and just play the streaming game. And maybe there will be a defense that you can pick up off the waivers that it really starts to thrive. Like there was one year I was able to pick up the LA Rams off the waivers, and they were killer that year. But in general, defensive performance is just hard to predict from year to year because there's so many more variables.
Yeah, it's impossible to burn a pick for me earlier on a defense, especially. I can maybe make the argument for a kicker if you want a Justin Tucker or somebody like that. But, the defense, you got to stream. You just don't know.
Yeah, you just 100%. And I want to move to talking about tight ends, because we haven't really touched on the tight end position, and we're going to look a little bit higher in the board. So Travis Kelce, big shot, goes in the first round. That's obvious. We don't need to talk about that. He's always going in the first round these days. But then we waited until the third round for the next tight end to come off, and Mark Andrews. And then TJ Hawkinson goes not too far after in the fourth round. And then 2 rounds later, we get our next 2 running backs, and then we don't get another 2 until the 8th round. So I just want to get y'all's thoughts on where the tight ends are going here. They weren't really flying off the board. So do you think people were waiting too long on tight ends? What are your thoughts on how tight ends fell on this board? Josh, let's start with you.
It makes perfect sense to me, in all honesty, as I mentioned, kind of towards the top. I mean, when you look at standard scoring, and just based on my projections, like if tight ends aren't scoring touchdowns, you can basically punt them the same way that you punt defenses and kickers. And realistically, there's probably 3 tight ends that actually have 10+ touchdown upside. Kelce, Andrews, and I would put Kittle in that conversation because he scored 11 last year, even though prior to that, he'd never scored more than 5, I believe. TJ Hawkinson was great in the red zone last year. Adding the competition with Jordan Addison, I think will skew those numbers a little bit. And Darren Waller being kind of the number 1 guy on his offense could potentially see that. But Daniel Jones needs a massive improvement when it comes to passing for him to realize that level of potential. So I think that this is kind of how it should be, in all honesty. I could see Kittle maybe going in the 4th or 5th, but I don't think really unless you're getting one of those elite guys, like probably 6 through 9 would be where I would start to consider a tight end if I didn't get one of the elite guys.
Yeah, Tom, same question. How are you feeling about how the tight ends fell in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the guy and what his role is on that team. Yeah, I certainly I'm the guy who took TJ Hawkinson in this mock draft. I am a big believer in him this year. If you look at his situation, not only end zone scoring. I mean, if you want to talk about his end zone scoring, no more Adam Thielen there. No more Adam Thielen, no more Dalvin Cook. Hawkinson, when he came into that offense in the middle of the year last year, it was obvious that he was going to play a significant role. They're going to scheme for him now in the, with the whole offseason to work with him. Their defense is going to suck too. So they're going to be chucking the ball. I think Hawkinson could have a huge year, but he won't surpass somebody like Andrews or Kelce. But Kittle to me is very I'm not as high on Kittle, even though he did kind of surge late in the season. I just don't. I don't trust that he's a prolific scorer in that offense.
Agreed.
Yeah,
1,000%.
I'm also a little worried with George Kittle this year. I'm worried we're going to get a little bit of touchdown regression. I hope he has a good season because I have him in a dynasty league that I really
Right.
want to win this year. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. The one that sticks out to me is just Darren Waller going in the 8th round. That feels like way too far for him to fall. I get that there's the injury concerns there, but to me, he's the number 1 receiving target in that offense, and so he should be able to cook. And hey, if he gets hurt, you're just going to be playing the streaming game anyway. So why not take that dart throw a little earlier? So we're going to go through and we're going to recap our teams right now. And Tom, we're going to start with you. We're going to highlight your team and just talk through, did you have a strategy? Did it go well? Did you have to change? And you don't have to talk about every player, but just talk about what you want in terms of how your team went.
It's just adorable to think I had a strategy here. I think I did okay. Let me see. I got some guys that I'm excited about for this year. I'm happy to be part of the Bijan experiment. I don't. It's so funny. Like I don't really trust that Diggs is going to be that great this year, and I just see that I missed out on Ross St. Brown, which I'm higher on. Honestly, I think I just kind of went with ADP, and I was also just getting acclimated to the podcast today. The rest of the team, we just talked about Hawkinson. I like Etienne this year. I like the Jags this year. Fields I kind of did 2 quarterbacks, which is usually something I never do. And I have Fields and Richardson. I would have been happier waiting till I got Richardson as a streaming quarterback and probably taking somebody else there. Who could I have gotten that spot that I got Fields? I don't know.
Cooper Williams,
Cooper,
Kamara, DJ Moore.
I would have rather had Amari Cooper, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we mock draft. We try things out, we see how it goes, and then we make pivots. I've used this show to improve my own drafts and implement strategies that I whiffed on during the show. But
yeah, and you did mention, Tom, that you'd wanted Deebo Samuel, so I'm sure there was a bit of like buyer's remorse a little bit, and it was like, oh crap, now I'm scrambling. Let me just take the next guy. So.
Exactly right.
It didn't help that Zach's entire mission was just to come and snipe you all game long. But I love the Bijan pick personally, so I think you just won the draft all right there with taking him in the first round. Josh, exactly. Josh, we're going to come to you. Talk about your team. If you had a strategy, talk through it. Talk how it went.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy is touchdowns, and it's that plain and simple. Grab the guys with the most touchdown upside. McCaffrey went 1 pick before me. I would have considered Chase had this been a PPR draft, but being at standard, I knew that I was going to wait for wide receiver. Go as robust RB as I can get. I'm huge on Ramondre Stevenson this year. I even considered Andrews there at the 208, honestly, but I really did not think that Stevenson would get back to me at the 303. So, adding Lamar there in the 4th, obviously it's a nice little stack there with Andrews, but I don't put as much emphasis on stacks in redraft as I would maybe in like a dynasty or a best ball draft. Pierce, I think he's going to take a big leap this year. They're going to involve him more in the passing game. I think the people that are buying into the narrative that Devin Singletary is going to have some value there in Houston are smoking some stuff that I want my hands on. DJ Moore, Drake London, number 1 targets in their offense. So pretty easy picks there for me. We've seen how Jerick McKinnon was used in Kansas City. And I think that there's a lot of potential there for Antonio Gibson to be used very similarly now with Eric Bieniemy calling the plays. Dobbins just kept falling. And I know there's been some concerns there, not, at practice, but he's my 5th running back and it's the 9th round. I'll take a stab there. And from there, it's really just kind of dart throws. Maybe Courtland Sutton does better, or maybe I was a year too early on Courtland Sutton because I was big on him last year. And then I can kind of just rotate in on 3rd wide receiver flexes between, the upside of Sky Moore, Elijah Moore, if Cleveland passes more, Adam Thielen. just kind of being like the lone number one guy there in Carolina. Again, just kind of dart throws later in the draft.
Yeah, I do think it's been interesting to see how low Adam Thielen's ADP is, given that he's the number one target in that offense, ostensibly. And also
30-plus-year-old wide receivers, man. You want to talk about ageism? It's real.
And then also, I think your Cortland Sutton pick is actually really interesting because the Tim Patrick injury seems to not have changed Cortland Sutton's ADP at all. And it seemed like Tim Patrick was the biggest threat to Cortland Sutton's role in that offense, more so than Jerry Jeudy. So I like taking that dart throw late. So oops of the draft, I have primarily one, and this is just taking a shot at my buddy, my co-host for our Best Ball podcast, Matt Record, taking a team defense in the 13th round. Could have waited at least until the 14th round when it's going to be your last two picks anyways. That's my biggest one there. And then also just taking Cole Kmet when you already have Kyle Pitts.
I mean, there's Matt's, it felt gross anyway. So I get it.
There you go. And then the last one I have is nobody drafted Daniel Jones. Come on, y'all.
Honestly, I considered it, but I don't really feel a need to draft two quarterbacks in a 10-team league. And because I went so early at quarterback, I'm like, yeah, I'll just wait. So
see, for me, it was the fact that guys like Russell Wilson and was coming off the board, and Daniel Jones isn't when he ran for 700 yards last year. I'm like, the rushing quarterbacks, they're going to be elite in this standard non-PPR scoring.
15 touchdowns, man. 15 passing touchdowns. That's it.
Yeah, but when he's rushing for multiple touchdowns, what do you have? 7 rushing touchdowns in a year? Come on.
Okay, still 22 touchdowns. Ain't much.
It's going to go up this year. He's got better pass catchers. It's going to be all good. I'm keeping the faith. So that we're going to start wrapping up our show, but we have a big announcement that we need to make sure we highlight. I'm going to turn it over to Josh for this announcement.
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with everything that we do at Club Fantasy and Women of Fantasy Football, we are heading into season 4 of the WOFF podcast with Faith Enos and Kelly Singh. It's going to be 4 straight weeks of interviewing some fantastic women in this space, not just in fantasy football, but also in the world of football. Our first guest, Kelly's going solo this week, and she is interviewing former Raiders CEO, Amy Trask, who also is an analyst with CBS Sports. So we're super excited about that. It's going to be on Wednesday, August 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm correlating with all of these shows. We have weekly raffles that we're doing. So we're raffling off 2 signed jerseys every single week. 100% of the ticket sales go towards our WOFF Galvanize Scholarship Fund. Galvanize, if you're unfamiliar, it's an organization founded by NFL on Fox sports reporter Laura Oakman. It's all about teaching, coaching, mentoring young women that want to get into sports broadcasting in the world of sports. We've had a lot of success just with this partnership as a whole. Last year, we raised over $3,600 for the scholarship fund. We're off to a pretty decent start this year. So if you head over to womenoffantasyfootball.com, or if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can head to the link or the description. There's a link to send you over to where you can buy raffle tickets. This week, we're raffling off a signed Jonathan Taylor Colts jersey and a signed Nick Chubb Browns jersey. So, Tom, get your piece of Nick Chubb, baby.
There we go. Yeah.
Tickets are $5. And as I mentioned, 100% of the ticket sales go towards our scholarship fund with Galvanize. So any and all support, whether it's shares, retweets, even ticket purchases, all of that is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it's a great cause and great show, great guest. And yeah, I got my raffle tickets in this week. I'm looking forward to hopefully, crossing my fingers Wednesday night, hoping for one of those jerseys. So just plug in all of our rest of our stuff real quick. So tonight we have the next episode of Summer School, our best ball podcast, where we're going to talk through tournament strategy and how to draft each position in best ball tournaments. Don't want to miss that. We had our Dynasty podcast, Dynasty After Party, aired yesterday. Michael Sicoli is back from vacation and took y'all through a great episode last night.
You say vacation, he was covering the Women's World Cup. I mean fair point. Josh, are we in on her story in the making this week? I know her story is taking a break because the WOFF podcast is going on. So
great. And so then Tuesday night, we'll have Kelly Singh and Adam Howes bringing you Who's Your Caddy, our DFS golf show. Yes, if you want DFS golf, fantasy golf, we got you covered. And then Wednesday night, like Josh said, we have our first episode of the WOFF podcast this week, interviewing none other than Amy Trask. We also have articles on our website covering all 32 teams that you can get. And so if you want to figure out how to attack each team in your redraft leagues this season, just go to clubfantasyffl.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on notifications on the YouTube channel. And Tom, thank you so much for this episode. It was a great time. Always good to mock draft. Tell the people where they can find you, what to be looking out for you, and support the writers, man.
Yes, exactly.
And actors.
Both of you guys. Yes, support everybody who's striking. There's actually quite a few labor unions striking outside of Hollywood as well. Just power to the people. Thank you, Faith, for hooking me up with this. This was a lot of fun. I love talking fantasy football, and those sound like some great causes. And I'm going to be buying some raffle tickets to get my piece of Nick Chubb.
Appreciate that.
I love it. Thank you, Scott. Josh, tell the people bye.
See ya. Thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
Take care, guys. All right,
appreciate you both. So for Tom Everett Scott and for Josh Hudson, I'm Austin Amandolia. This has been Mock It Like It's Hot. Catch us here every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We'll see you next time.